Hey, this is Troy Taylor with the Championship Football Coaches Clinic. I got my longtime friend, Tom Hall. I've known him since I was about probably 16 years old. And this is going to be a special broadcast today because we're doing Tom Hall, a football life. And I know a lot about Coach Hall, but I don't know how much other people know. Um, so, Coach, introduce yourself to the clinic. Let people know where did you play ball, where all you've coached, and then we'll get going with this thing.
All right. Tom Hall. I grew up in Chesterfield. My football life started at Falling Creek for the Falling Creek Falcons. I don't even think it's an association anymore.
Mm-mm.
But back in the day, Falling Creek was one of the premier like Chesterfield quarterback league programs that you can play for, man. And it was maybe the greatest experience I've ever had. And people don't realize that there's so many
Why
different.
is that? Why is that, Tom? Why was it the greatest you've ever had?
Well, I mean, I think coaching was one. I think the men that um, like invested their time for all of us kids were like into it, and it wasn't about them, And I think
Yeah.
things change. I think throughout time, you know, as a society, I feel like little league programs, whether it's CQL or AAU, so many coaches make it about themselves, and it's not about that. It's about the development of the kid. And I mean, I was very fortunate that the guys I played for, um, it was just amazing. And I remember, and you probably remember this, if you were playing at the Chesterfield Courthouse as a little, I mean, people don't
Yeah.
understand that there was a stadium at Chesterfield Courthouse back in the day where they used to have rodeos.
Oh
And,
yeah.
I
Or the
mean,
county fair.
yeah, in that where the county fair was, and it was just if you were playing there, it was a big to do. And I mean, it was just I can remember, I can still kind of shut my eyes and remember the sights and smells and sounds of back in the day. And it was just it truly was like one of those things that's etched in your mind where like if you're at a particular place as an adult now and you get a smell or a sound or something, and it kind of takes me back to that and my parents and just the relationships that I have with my teammates and those coaches. It's something special. And from there it was I lived over there in the Falling Creek area. So my high school years I started at Meadowbrook, and I got to play for a guy named Dick Overton my freshman year, and then Jamie Occasion took the job my sophomore year, and he had a fantastic assistant coach named Bill Bowles. And I mean, those two guys just really kind of changed that program around at the time. And I made some poor decisions in my life as we all do as 15-year-old kids. And my dad said, I'm gonna get your attention. We're gonna move. And he packed us up and we moved to Bird. And that's where I ended up finishing. And
So
obviously,
did you go to Gill School?
no, I didn't. You said that earlier before we went on. I did
Yeah.
not. No.
I don't know why someone told me that, or I don't even know why I even thought that. So when did you meet Matt Bland?
Also, Matt Bland, Matt Bland and I went to Falling Creek Elementary together. I've known Matt since we were either 7 or 8. He's my oldest friend that I still keep in touch with. So Matt and I actually played at Falling Creek when we first started out, and then Matt moved. Matt, moved away, and I didn't see Matt for until we were 8th graders. And
Yeah, and Matt Bland is the longtime coach at LC Bird.
yeah,
I mean, he's been pretty much coaching there since 1992.
yep,
And he was the line coach and the defensive coordinator now. He played at WVU for the people that are watching that might not be familiar with
yeah,
Richmond area football. So I just
yeah.
wanted to let people know that, Tom, because there's probably going to be people watching from all around the country.
That's cool. Yeah, but Matt, we didn't reconnect until 8th grade, and that was my last year at Falling Creek, and Matt was at Salem Church, and it was pretty crazy. And then kind of linked back together. And then obviously when we moved to Bird right before my junior year, we were teammates once again. So, but yeah, it was a great experience at Bird. Getting a chance to play for Dutch Schrotenboer, Jim Waters, Ron Paulette, Wayne Motley. That's really the reason I got into coaching. And a lot of people don't know that. It's not. It was the relationships that I saw those guys have with each other. It just the fun that they had. That was one of those things that I wanted that in my life,
Yeah.
and it's just Jim Waters is like a second father to me. And I know he's like that with every kid that played for him. But, he was one of those guys that, besides my father, that was so instrumental to me.
Yeah. So Coach Waters was the longtime defensive coordinator at LC Bird. Coach Tom, tell everybody about the story about Coach Schrotenborough coming from Alpena, Michigan, and coming to LC Bird. And I mean, the school was started in 1978. Tom Bratt was the head coach. He went on to coach offensive line at Maryland. Then Coach Peachy was the coach for a couple of years. He ended up going back to Liberty University, and then they hire Coach Schrotenborough.
Right.
So just can you we're documenting history, Tom.
Okay.
So
yeah. So I remember when Coach was hired. He was this, for those people who knew him, he was like the grandfather to everyone. I mean, he was this little German guy, and I mean, but he was really quiet and always had a pipe, and he was always smoking the pipe. And back then you could smoke in the school and on the sideline. I mean, it wouldn't be something that was crazy to see him like light up on the sideline.
Yeah.
Imagine doing that nowadays. I mean,
how old was he really though? Because I mean, we think people, when you're younger, you think people are older than what they are. I mean, was he 60? Was he 50? I mean, how old was Coach?
That is the mystery that we all question. I don't know. I mean, I think he might have been in his late 50s when he took the job.
So how old are you now, Tom?
I will be 55 in June.
So imagine that. I guess it would be like you leaving Manchester and going to another state, and you have this whole staff with you.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So that's the difference. That's the difference, that Aubrey Lindsay was the principal at Bird, and he was my principal. An amazing guy. I mean, just
what was so good about him? Because I mean, LC Bird has only had 6 principals in 45 years.
Right.
I mean, that's got to be a record.
Well, I mean, yeah, because so I mean, we can have a whole podcast about him. I mean, that he was, and looking as a professional now, he would be the guy that you would want to work for. I mean, he was all about, it wasn't just about one sport. It was about, he wanted Bird's the athletic programs to be strong. He wanted Bird's, every program at school, whether it was band or chorus or what drama, he wanted everything to be top notch, and he was always all in. And I mean, a guy that,
is he still alive?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
We'll get him on, Tom. Tom, you set it up and we'll get him on. I mean, this might be something that administrators around the country, or even, our county or state, need to watch.
Right.
You need to learn from people like this. Like
so let me just share the difference. So Dutch was actually the assistant coach at Alpena.
Wow.
Jim Waters was the head coach at Alpena.
Are you kidding me?
No, you didn't know that. So
I knew Coach Waters was the baseball coach. I never knew Coach Waters was the head coach.
Right.
How many years?
So there was some issue. I don't know what it was. And so basically when this job came open, Aubrey Lindsay when Peachy left to go back to Liberty.
I mean, that's Liberty University. So 2 of Bird's first coaches went on to coach college football or came from college football. That's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. So anyway, Aubrey Lindsay and Chesterfield put out a national search. And
that's unheard of.
It's unheard of.
Even today. I mean, even with the internet, it's unheard of.
Right. and so they ended up, weeding through a bunch of. I mean, you can obviously imagine the amount of applicants, and they came across this Glenn Dutch Schrotenboer, and when you did you play for him? Did you play
No,
for?
my freshman year was Coach Paulkette's first year. My 8th grade year, I played for OB Gates, but I went to the state championship game, which was Coach Schrotenboer's
Right.
last game. So I knew of him. I saw pictures of him, and I saw like some caricatures, like they had a cartoon picture of him with frogs in the office.
Yeah.
But I never got a chance to meet him. I just knew the legend of him.
Right. Well, I mean, and he sells himself. He's like I said, when I first introduced him, he was like everyone's grandfather. I mean, it was just everyone was comfortable around him, whether you were an athlete or whether you were a student. Everyone was comfortable, and I mean, he just sold himself. But his deal was, if he was going to move his family to Chesterfield, Virginia, he was going to bring his assistants, and obviously Aubrey Lindsay was all in, and that's when Coach Waters, Coach Paulkett, and there was another guy who ended up
at Monacan.
Yeah, was it Monacan or Clover Hill? I thought Coach Jennings. I don't know who it was, to be honest with you. But
the AD at Monacan was one of the guys that was on the original staff, and I can't remember his name. I interviewed with him. I can look it up.
Right. Well, anyway, so when those guys,
it was like 5 coaches he brought with him from Alpena, Michigan, which is on the northern part of Michigan, like near Canada. Right. For us that aren't good at geography, like me.
Like me too. But yeah, I mean, just and that's kind of when, Bird in '78, they were respectable, and then they were respectable under Peachy, but Bird did not get to be Bird without Dutch Schrotenboer. And it was it's just kind of he was the guy that introduced the wings on the helmet. He was the guy that introduced Hail to the Victors, because there was no school fight song. And so I remember us practicing singing it at the end of Thursday walkthroughs. I mean, he was like, we've got to establish a
tradition. And his tradition, I mean, for y'all that don't know, I mean, he pretty much took the University of Michigan's tradition and just brought it to Bird. I mean, it was I formation, 4-3 defense. And Coach Waters actually went to Michigan State. So I don't know how he felt about that, but I mean, he just brought that to Bird. It just made sense. I mean, you want to talk about branding. I mean, that guy was ahead of his time.
Way ahead of his time. So, and the rest is history. I mean, you look at the hundreds of guys that have come out from Bird and to go on and play college professional football. I mean, you look at the number of guys that are actually coaching. And I'm not just talking about at the high school level. I'm talking about coaching, period, that the school had such a direct link to, man. It's pretty amazing. I mean, for that school just to be fairly new, opened up in '78. So I was really happy to be part of that. Even though I grew up in the Fallen Creek and Meadowbrook area my whole life, I still felt like Bird was always home. And it was because of not just Dutch and Coach Waters and Aubrey Lindsay, Chuck Tester, John Fergie. I mean, these were just strong relationships that you build as a young person. And those people, man, had such an influence on me.
What was so special about those guys?
What was so special? I mean, everything. I mean, everything that we try to be, they check the boxes. I mean, just treating every kid. I mean, every kid is different. You've got to reach every kid. You're going to have to kind of meet them on their playing field, and they did that. And then just seeing their interactions with each other. I remember freaking Coach Waters like taking his shirt off and getting on that tractor and cutting the game field at the end of track practice. I mean, it's like, and that he loved that. And of course, Paulkett always giving him just hell about, put your shirt on, Jimmy. I mean, it was great. But I mean,
it was their life. It was their life. It was what their whole being revolved around. I mean, they were dads and husbands, but I mean, their whole life was Bird football.
Yeah, and they were dads to a lot of kids. I mean, and so I will tell you this. So they were so special to me. They were always, when I would come home from college, they were always the second place I would go. I would always come home first, but I would always go up and see them second every time. It didn't matter. It didn't matter if it was my freshman year up until my last year. It was always going to see them. And I mean, and shoot, and so it was kind of crazy. So from there, talking about where I went, I was fortunate enough. I signed with Virginia Tech. Bill Dooley was the head coach. Pat Watson was the guy that recruited me. He was really the reason I went to Tech. It was my relationship with Coach Watson, and so we were fortunate enough. I did not get redshirted my freshman year. I actually played, and that was the first team to win a bowl game at Virginia Tech. We beat NC State in the Peach Bowl in a final second field goal. And it was funny. So here you go. I don't know if you know this. So we're going to kind of roll back. So after the game, it was chaos, pandemonium. Everyone's celebrating us winning. And I'm like celebrate with my teammates, and I get grabbed from behind. It was Matt Bland. Matt's father lived in Atlanta, and Matt was down there and came to the game, and it was just one of those things where you're like, oh my God, it's freaking awesome. So after we finished 10-1-1 my freshman year, they fired the whole staff. So
I mean, why? One of the coaches on that staff was Jim Tate, correct?
Jim Tate, yeah.
I mean, this summer I think I might have called you, but I got very sentimental thinking about Coach Tate, thinking about guys like Jim Reed and Coach Hansen, and how Coach Tate was so special, and how he told me when I was a young coach, he said, Troy, I don't know how good of a coach you are, but you're a great communicator, and he gave me the chance to be the head of the National Football Foundation clinics and camps. I mean, I was like 21, 22 years old, and like he was on that staff. So I get why did they get fired? I know they wanted Coach Beamer to be the coach, but
well, I mean, they really. So what? Back then, the head coach Bill Dooley was actually the athletic director as well, and so I'll never forget when he came to our house when he was talking to my parents. He said, Tom's going to be on scholarship no matter how long it takes him to go to finish out. Great. Yeah. Okay. So unfortunately he meant that. So there were a lot of guys who were there 6-7 years who were on scholarship. Well, for those people that don't know, your scholarship in college is a year-to-year contract. You sign it every year. So you either meet the standards of that contract and you maintain that, or you don't and you lose it. Well, he was keeping some of the older guys, aka Joe Jones, my buddy, was on scholarship.
Joe was a longtime high school coach in Virginia,
yep.
Kings Fork, and most recently Ocean Lakes. He's assistant in Western Branch.
Right.
Y'all that don't know, I mean, he looks just like Coach Hall. They're both offensive linemen from Virginia Tech.
Yeah. So Joe was on like they kept him on tennis scholarships. So he was unfortunately he was taking
on tennis.
He was taking care of his football guys, but with other scholarships.
Oh man,
it is what it is.
Yeah, what a great coach.
So he so they gave him a choice: resign as athletic director and stay as football coach, or we're gonna have to terminate you. Well, I mean that's a lot of money that he lost. So he was like, I'm just gonna step away. So yeah, so it was a big to do because I
mean, is this a known fact? I mean, do people know that's the reason that he got let go?
I think it's I mean that came out back in the mid 80s.
Okay.
We signed a petition to hire Pat Watson. There was also George Facekas was the longtime Maryland D-line coach who was also a Virginia Tech grad. They were up for the job. Bobby Ross. Also, another name that was being thrown around was Jimmy Laycock from William and Mary at the time.
You can't go wrong with either. And a lot of people forget about Coach Ross.
Right.
Coach Ross is probably the greatest football coach ever to come out of Richmond, Virginia.
No question. No question. So
won the national championship and played for the Super Bowl.
Right. And then they came in and introduced Frank Beamer. And, I mean, it was just like, who's this guy?
He was the young guy from Murray State, right? I mean,
Yeah.
how old was Coach Beamer at the time?
Oh, man. He had to be in his late 30s, early 40s I don't know, but I know he wasn't my age. I mean, he was
young.
Because Shane was just a little boy at the time when he got that job. So
yeah, me and Shane are about the same age.
Right. So it's kind of crazy. That was the transition. We had a rough couple years, and it was just as a 19, 20-year-old, you don't understand how we go from 10-1-1 to basically having everyone back to struggling. But now as a coach, I sympathize with what Coach Beamer was trying to do, because Troy, you go into a job, you want people. We all know you want people around you that you're comfortable with, whether they can coach or not. That's kind of like your comfort zone. You know what I mean? And that's what Coach Beamer did. He brought a bunch of guys from Murray State that were his comfort zone. And we went from having Pat Watson and Cliff Yoshida and Jim Tate and Tom Throckmorton and all the Billy Height.
Coach Throckmorton.
Yes.
He went on to be a Texan scout, and Coach Height, he got retained. Yeah. I mean, you could sit here and talk about all these guys for
all those guys. So we went from that to a bunch of guys who we didn't know about. And we struggled. And again, when I was 20 years old, it was one of those things. It was not a very good time there. So we actually had a large number of guys that just walked away from the team, and I was one of them. And I was like on the border of going into the military or becoming a state trooper. Kid you not.
Now, you were definitely tall enough. I know there was a height requirement at one time.
Right.
Be a trooper.
Right. And so I'd come home, and I didn't know. I mean, that was kind of a dark place in my life. When I was 20 years old, something that I felt was taken away from me. And again, now, looking back at it, I wasn't being very smart.
Yeah, but you were at a winning program, and then all of a sudden that changed. So, I mean,
it did, but it was still one of those things that if I would have been one of my players now, I would have told myself to suck it up, and just, fight through it and get through it. But it was just one of those things. I kind of felt strong about it. And so we had, I think there was like 30 some guys ended up leaving, and walking away from it. And so I'd come home. I really had no plan, which is, again, totally against how I was raised and everything. And so I was just sitting at home, and it was like February. I get a phone call from Hank Norton, Hank Norton is the longtime
legend.
He was a legend.
College Football Hall of Famer.
No question. He's one of the winningest coaches in the country at Ferrum College. And he said, come down and check us out. I went down, checked it out, and it was great. I had 1 year of eligibility and went down there and had a blast, man. We were loaded. Chris Warren, Freddie Stovall. There was I think there was 8 of us that went there from Tech and a couple other guys from other D1 schools. And we ended up making it to the national semifinal and losing it. And
Chris Warren played running back for the Seahawks. He was a starting tailback in the NFL. And I mean, Ferrum had been a junior college, correct? 2-year school.
Right.
And then what did they move to? Was it Division III or Division II or NAIA? What were they then?
Division III. They were Division III then. And so it was pretty cool. They took really good care of me. Hey, I never in a million years would I have thought that I would be at Ferrum College. And lo and behold, they always say God has a plan for you. Well, why would I end up at Ferrum? Well, I mean, it's pretty simple. I met my wife at Ferrum.
Wow.
And I mean, it was, and they say all the time, I mean, you're put on this earth for someone. I mean, I went to Ferrum solely because of that. I truly believe that.
So now you really can't, when you think of things in that perspective, you really can't question
No,
why you did what you did, or, why it happened.
right.
Because, what is it that, like Steve Jobs, man, I'm a little different,
Yeah.
Tom, but you know me. Like, I listened to Steve Jobs talk to MIT in 1992. I listened to him talk to Stanford graduates at the commencement. He says you can only connect the dots looking backwards.
No question. No question.
And that's
So,
what you're doing.
right. And so, there's things there that, I mean, we're all over the place right now, but there's
Now
always,
we're still going in your timeline, because we're
there's always,
transparent.
that things are put in our life we don't understand. And, and that's what the word faith is, man. You gotta go with it. And fortunately, that was the best move I've ever made, is going to Ferrum and meeting Kendall. And not just her, just me, making some great friendships of guys that I still have relationships with. So
Talk a little bit about your wife, and if there's any young coaches out there, coaches' wives. I've been to Divorce City. Other coaches have been to Divorce City. Some of them are headed to Divorce City. I mean, what does it take, and what should you look for in a coach's wife?
that's a great question. All right, so every year I talk at our banquet. I always have the coaches' wives stand up, and I always tell young coaches that are single when they come in our program, when you marry a woman, she better understand that she's going to share you with everyone. A coach's wife has to be on call, just like a preacher's wife, a doctor's wife. I mean, you better have someone that is going to fully support everything you do.
That they're a part of the ministry. They see that as their calling too.
It is. It's got to be. Otherwise, you're not going to be a long-term person in coaching, or you're not going to be in a long-term relationship. I mean, it is. Marriage is give and take anyway, and compromise. And I'm very fortunate. My wife has always been all in. She is, but she is as part of Manchester football as my daughters were. And all of our wives are an integral part of our program. And I think
I'm going to say this, because, you haven't talked about it yet, but y'all that are watching or the live stream are going to watch this. Tom took over the Manchester football program, which was mediocre at best, in like 1999.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's 2023 now, and he's won a lot of games. He's a perennial playoff team. He's won a state championship. He's built a great program. So, you're listening to a state championship coach here. Talk a little bit about your wife sitting in the stands and what she used to do. I don't know if she still does it, but does she still video the games?
Yeah, I had to get her out of the stands. And you guys that are coaches out there, you're going to want to make sure that your wives and kids, they better have, everyone's better have thick skin when you're a coach, right? I mean, my God. But your wives and kids better have thicker skin than we do as coaches. Yeah, it was funny because it was actually the Bird game. One year we were playing over there, and a couple parents were making comments that we were throwing the game because I was a Bird grad. And so the coaches' wives literally almost came to blows in the stands. And so after that, I'm like, all right, you're going to be videotaping our games from now on. So she actually videotapes our games, and most of the other wives, they kind of sit away from people, which it is what it is. That's we all second guess. Even watching TV,
Yeah.
Second guess. That's the nature.
They pay their money, they can say what they want.
Sure. So it's so she still does that now. She's up in the press box, and she probably still she's like she's piss and vinegar, man. That's for sure.
Yeah. She's a little lady. You're 6'4".
Yeah.
How tall is she?
She's 5'2" at best.
Wow. So it's just she's been a big part of this. You building that program over there at Manchester, and we have Stuart Sink, coach, he's the only man I've ever met who has a bigger head than me. Smart coach. Stuart was on your first staff, and we're going to get to that.
Yeah.
So we're pretty much with you at Ferrum.
Yep.
You graduate, and I wanna ask you about your dad.
Oh my
Um,
God. Yeah.
yeah, no, I want you to talk. I want you to talk about your dad because you've talked about your, your coaching influences. But
Yeah.
how big was your dad, and what was his background? Where did he come from? And your parents on your coaching and your coaching career. And I mean,
Yeah.
I remember your dad would sit in the end zone. So
Yeah.
I just this is we're documenting history, Tom.
Yeah.
So your grandkids will watch this one
Yeah.
day.
We so my mom and dad were, they got married in high school. They were married for
Where are they from? Are they from Richmond?
no, they were from Fredericksburg. They went to James Monroe High School. My dad played against the great Thomas Dale teams and the great Manchester teams back in the 50s. Um, just I was actually born in Fredericksburg. We moved to Richmond when I was 4. My dad was a civil servant. He worked at Fort AP Hill, Fort Pickett. Um, my mom did a little bit of everything. She was a housewife, church secretary. I mean, she worked in the lunch line at Fallen Creek Middle School. I mean, just I have 2 older sisters that were like 9 and 7 years older than I was, but it was just
So to say you were a mistake would be a bad way of
I
putting it.
think, yeah, I think I was an oops, man. I think I was an oops. So it was, they swear I wasn't, but I mean, they're going, you wait 9 and 7 years after your kids. I mean, something's up. But I mean, it's,
Hey, it all worked out.
no question. So I strict Southern Baptist family. Just yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no alcohol, no, nothing like that. Church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. Um, a very strong foundation, which I'm glad they did. They, my dad, both my parents, I mean, they were always, you know, very, very low blue collar folks, but we always had everything that we would ever want.
Or need.
Or
They gave you
yeah,
what you needed.
anything. Um, but it was my dad, um, you know, my parents never missed a game as a player, and even when I was started coaching, they would travel around. Just that, which is rare.
Yeah, my
Uh,
parents were the same way, Tom.
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, they set the standard for sure of what you should be as a parent. Um, no, I just I lost my mom to cancer. Shoot, it was, I think it's been 12, 13 years now. And I lost my dad in 19. It was actually, it was pretty surreal. We won the state championship in December of 2018, and it was a cold, brutally cold day in
Hmm.
Hampton. And I'll never forget after the game, my dad said, T, that's probably the last game I'm ever going to see. I'm like, what are you
Wow.
talking about? I said, I'm going to be back next year. We'll be back. He's like, yeah. And sure enough, February 13th, which is coming up, he always said they're going to find me. He was a diehard Tennessee fan. Don't know where that came from. I mean, I played at Virginia Tech. I mean, but he was a diehard Tennessee fan. Anytime you see him, if he didn't have a Manchester hat, he would have a Tennessee hat on. And he used to laugh. He was like, T, y'all gonna find me. I'm gonna be asleep in my chair with my Tennessee blanket on, and I'll be daggone if that's not how we found him. And
Wow.
he had his hands on his chest. Had his Tennessee blanket on, and his feet were uncovered, and he just fell asleep and didn't wake up. But he knew that's how he was going to leave this place. And I'm like, I'll be daggone, Dad, you made the call. But yeah, I mean, it's they were great people. Um, Miss them. I think about them every day. If you can see that, it's my dad's hat,
Yeah.
Tennessee hat right there.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, they
Yeah. I know what they meant to you because I followed you, man. I mean,
yeah,
we're connected.
yeah,
I'm getting emotional just thinking about it.
yeah.
Um,
So we still have that
you're a
bench
bird
that
guy.
had set on. It's still in the end zone. and it's got a nameplate on the back of it for him, a nameplate on the back for Marty Rose, who was my longtime head JV coach, who passed away before the state championship year. And those benches they sit in our end zone at our stadium. So it's pretty cool that the school has honored those people, and I get a chance to kind of look down there every game, and which is really neat and really special for me.
Yeah. So you met your wife at Ferrum.
Yep.
Graduated from Ferrum.
No,
and then,
did not graduate from Ferrum.
Okay. You went to Virginia State, right?
Yeah. So
okay.
When I came home from Ferrum, I was chasing a dream, and I had a couple tryouts with the league. And so the year off between,
I mean, you were a heck of an athlete. I mean, Coach Bland told me you could run. You were athletic as crap. I mean, you probably could have played in the NFL.
Well, I got a shot, and it just wasn't meant to be. And between 1990 and 91, I actually worked at Bird. I was an assistant coach and security monitor, and coached track and ran the weight room, and it was great. And in the winter, I get a phone call from a guy named Lou Anderson. And Lou had just taken over the job at Virginia State. And I had about a year left of school plus student teaching. And Lou said, Tom, I need an offensive line coach. I'll pay you a salary. We'll pay for your school. What do you think? I'm like, okay, I'm in.
Yeah, I want to spend some time talking about Coach Lou Anderson, because he is a legend. And he was a high school coach in Richmond, Virginia. And I mean, Tom, it's crazy, man. Like, you know how I am, man. Like, you surround yourself with people that you want to be like, but sometimes, like, it ain't even up to you, man. It's like divine intervention. It's like they summoned you. And these people we're talking about, Lou Anderson.
Yeah,
I mean, he took me under his wing, and he treated me like I was one of his own, even though he was a black man from Richmond, and I'm a white kid from Chesterfield, but he knew I was a coach.
Yeah. Lou was pretty. It was wild. I mean, it just, and again, you sit there and you think about why this happened, and again, going from Virginia Tech to Ferrum and how that opened doors, and then from going to chasing your dream to having your dream shut down, and then having another thing open up. It was just, it was awesome. So our staff at Virginia State was Lou Anderson, again, high school legend. He just a great guy. Then you had Waverly Tiller that was on that staff at Virginia State, who went on to be the longtime head coach at Elizabeth City State. You had Morgan Faison, who later became the head coach of Virginia State, but also went to Delaware State and Norfolk State. You had Aaron Jones, who became the head coach of Virginia Union, and then went to a couple different places. You had Willie Spence, who was forever either at Virginia Union and was back at Huguenot. He was with Coach McPhee for a long time. Then you had a guy named Mike Davis, who's been an NFL scout. His son actually plays at Thomas Dale now, but I saw Mike after our game with Thomas Dale this year. But Mike's been, I think he's with the Jaguars now, but he's been an NFL scout for over 30 years. Steve Rankin, who's been in and out.
Is that Mike Davis, who's Chili Davis's is Chili Davis his dad? Coaches at FAMU or no?
You know what? I don't know, Troy. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. And then, I was fortunate enough to be part of that great group of guys for 2.5 years. And for 2.5 years, and, got my degree, got married in that time. And then, it's funny because everything always led me back to Bird. So when I finished up and I got my degree and I did my student teaching, there was no job. There was no, there was no opportunity. I mean, I did not want, at the time, I did not want to stay in college. It was just not what I wanted.
Yeah, you wanted to be like Coach Waters. You wanted to be like Coach Strobor.
Exactly. I wanted that.
That was where your heart was. It wasn't chasing the college football dream.
Correct.
And traveling around the country and all that stuff that goes with that.
So I was going to go back. I was going to go back and be like a permanent sub, whatever, Aubrey Lindsay was going to do that, but I wasn't going to be a teacher, but I was going to be something in the building. And, so Matt Bland and I.
And Coach Bland was my coach. For
Right.
y'all that don't know, he was my coach. He came there when I was a freshman. That was his first year teaching. He was right out of school at WVU.
Right.
And he's Coach, Hall's longest best friend.
Yep.
So Coach Bland's impact on me, man. I'm probably gonna have to do a show on that, man. But
no question. Well, it was funny because we were going to end up being on staff together, and we were. So remember the bird coaches would always go away to the river, and they would do like a coaches retreat, and we were down at the river, and I got 2 phone calls the same day. I got a phone call from Hopewell and a phone call from Franklin from a guy named Jim Jervy. And they both offered me jobs, both offered me teaching jobs. And I'm like, daggone, man. And so I'm like, I talked to Coach Schrotenboer, and I'm like, they've got a contract for me, and I really want to be with you guys. I really want to stay here. And again, they called the principal, and there was nothing upcoming. So my wife and I actually went to Franklin, Virginia, which is in western Tidewater.
Yeah, Franklin City, y'all, not Franklin County. I call it peanut country.
It is peanut country, and it's a beautiful. You've been there. You were at my house at one. So it's a beautiful small town. Just what you would envision like Mayberry looking like. And I'm like, you know what? I think this would be a pretty cool place to start out. And so I accepted the job with Jim Jervy and was there as the defensive coordinator. It was awesome. Head track coach, defensive coordinator, ran the weight room. And
how old were you?
I was 23.
Wow.
Yeah. 23, and just it was awesome. And Jim comes to me in late November, says, Tom, I'm retiring. And I'm like, oh my God. So I've just committed to come here, and you're retiring. And so I understood. And so we mentioned this guy earlier, Joe Jones, and Joe and I actually crossed paths again a couple years prior to me taking the Franklin job, because Joe was the head coach at Windsor High School, and I was recruiting for Virginia State. And I went down there, and I walked in, and I'm like, who's the head football coach here? And they said, Joe Jones. And I'm like, oh my God. I said, all right, just please tell them the Virginia State coach is here. And we reconnected, and it was awesome. Because it was just, Joe was my grad assistant when I played at Virginia Tech. That's where we first met. So anyway, to make a long story short, I called Joe. I said, you need to put in for the Franklin job so we can coach. And believe it or not, Franklin paid really well. And so he did. He came there. We worked together there for 2 years. And then he ended up deciding he's going to leave. He takes the Smithfield job. I go to Lakeland High School as the defensive coordinator there in Suffolk, and work for a great guy named Ed Smithers. And from
before you get to Lakeland,
mm-hmm.
I think this is the time that you tell the story where you first meet me and my brother.
Yes. So being at Franklin, and Coach Bland being at Bird, we came up with this idea of doing like lineman camps, so we can work together.
Practicing out of season was not allowed. You
right.
couldn't do anything unless it was a camp. So these guys were ahead of the curve.
Right.
They had camps so they could basically practice out of season without pads on.
Correct. So we ran a camp, and we would do it 1 week. We would do it in Franklin, and Coach Bland would bring his kids down, and then in a couple of weeks we would go up to Bird, and we would do everything from teaching techniques to competing to lifting, and that's where I met Big T and Little T, Troy and Tony Taylor, Freddie Hall,
the offensive line coach at Thomasdale, long time.
Yeah,
offensive line coach.
Tony Morgan. It was just it was really cool just meeting that. And I had this kid named Chris Claggett, who we called Butterbean. And it
And I
was
don't think some people remember who Butterbean was. Why did he get that nickname?
because he was short and stout.
And he looked like the boxer Butterbean.
He did. And actually Butterbean lives in Chesterfield now. So it's great. I mean, you know, I had Matt and his linemen, they came over to my house and we would feed them lunch, and it's really cool. And you don't sit there and think about, okay, that, you know, these two twins, what an impact they're going to have one day in 804 football. And then it's kind of crazy how everything's kind of come about. But anyway, so that's after I met you guys. I went to Lakeland.
You don't want to tell them about the bench press competition? I mean,
There's not much to talk about. I mean, it was
we
hilarious.
couldn't even bench 185.
I think the most was.
Yeah, me or my brother could not bench 185, but when Coach Bland would spot us at Bird, we were doing 275.
Yes.
Yeah, we used to call it a Coach Bland spot, dude.
No question.
If we thought we could do 275, then we were stronger than the other guys.
Yeah, I mean, but you know, as a coach now, so just think about this. As a coach now, why do you think he would do that? Because how did you feel when you did that 275?
Man,
like
we thought we could beat anybody.
Right. But then you came down to our place and I just lifted it up for you and left it.
You did that to mess with him too, I know. Yeah.
Yep. So anyway, that's good times. But yeah, so there's another guy that was a pretty integral part growing up, and that was a guy named Gail Parker. And Gail was actually part of the Marshall staff when the Marshall plane went down. He and the other coach were out on a recruiting trip. But Gail Parker was a legend. He played at Oscar Smith. He was inducted into the Oscar Smith Hall of Fame. But Gail was a big time insurance guy down in Southampton County. But he coached with Jim, and then I got a chance to coach with him with Jim, and then I coached with him at Lakeland. But at the time, you know, I'm thinking now, you know, I'm 26, whatever, 27, somewhere around there, and I'm thinking, you know, I really want to be a head coach. I want to be a head coach one day. And he was like, well, you need to learn all the X's and O's from everyone that you can learn. Because when I was with Jim, he was wing T. You know, we ran 5-3 defense, which is called a 3-3 now. When I went to Lakeland was pro I, you know, very much like Bird, power, ISO, trap, counter. And I ran a 5-2, which is called a 3-4 now. But there was one offense that I had not learned, and that was the split back veer. And the guy because Dwight Reagan was the guy at Sussex, but Dwight had retired from coaching. But there was one other guy that was still doing it. And he was a guy that just happened to be at Franklin years ago, and that was a guy named Bill Shirley. Well,
I know Coach Shirley.
Oh, yeah. Anyone that's in coaching in Virginia knows Bill Shirley. Bill Shirley is true split back veer. So he was at Buffalo Gap High School up outside Stanton, up in the mountains. And so at the time, my wife was with child with our second daughter. And Gail Parker worked it out where I got hired up with Bill Shirley and his staff. So we packed up. Now, Franklin was about an hour from Chesterfield, where my parents were and everything else. Going up to Stanton was a little bit different because you were over Afton Mountain. It was a couple hours away. We knew no one. And it was just basically starting over. And again, talking about having a wife that's supportive, I mean, she was all in, and she's, you know, let's go, let's do it. And it was absolutely beautiful place to live, tough kids. And I was very fortunate to learn that offense. And sure enough, I was there for 2 years, Troy. And Bill Shirley says, Tom, I'm retiring. And I'm like, oh my God. So this is like crazy. So I've been to a couple different places now where the guys retired. Well, I loved it up. I loved it so much up there. I wanted it. I wanted that job. And he talked to me about taking over the job. And you know, it was just everything that you would hope for. You had tough kids. It was a
It was like your mini bird. It was like your mini bird.
It was, yes. Yeah. And I felt at home and I could see a future there. But the principal just drug his feet. It was just, we're getting like February and they still hadn't announced anything. Well, that's when, my mom and dad said, hey, the Manchester job just came open. And I'm like, I really want to stay up here. I mean, I live on 5 acres. I got the Allegheny Mountains in front of me. I got the Blue Ridge behind me. It's like for a country boy, this is like perfect. I love it up here. They said, well, you need to put in for it. Well, Manchester had already conducted interviews. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe if I can interview at Manchester, maybe that will force this guy to offer me the job, thinking like a 20-year-old, And
So how old are you at this point?
So I am 28 at this point. All right. So 28 years old, so I get Coach Beamer. Coach Beamer calls Manchester.
Can I ask you something about Coach Beamer?
Yeah.
Is it true that Coach Beamer was quoted in the paper saying the biggest mistake he's ever made was allowing Tom Hall to come back on the team?
I've never heard that one.
Okay. Matt Bland said he has an article that it says that. Is that true?
That's not true.
Okay.
That's true. Oh, my God. Matt Bland. He's had all kinds of stories.
We'll get him on here one day, man, but I don't think he'll talk.
You need to get him on here with me. Matt would tell people that I would carry his pads to practice. I'm like, come on, man.
Yeah. I've heard that many times.
I know. I'm sure you have. So anyway, so where was I? So anyway.
So Matt Bland also interviewed for the Manchester job because he was an assistant at Bird. Did y'all talk about that?
Yes, we did. We had talked about that.
Okay, and the rumor is that legend states that during Coach Bland's interview at Manchester, they asked him about a group of players that basically blocked Little League players from running onto the field. And it's rumored that me and my brother and a guy who's on Totem Pole Sports named Coach Bald, Kyle Anderson, and a guy named Tony Morgan actually prevented those players, those Little League football players, from running onto the field. Have you ever heard of that story, or did that occur? Do you have any knowledge of that?
I don't, but that's a funny story. That sounds like what you guys would do.
Yes. Shane Reynolds told me that I should not do this podcast. He was like, Troy, you're going to talk too much. People are going to find out like what you really think and believe.
Yeah.
Like you might actually be giving people too much information.
Yeah. So here.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we're here. We're documenting history. So,
yeah. So it's funny. But Matt he was one of the guys that interviewed. But anyway, I got a bunch of guys to call Lloyd Swellness, who at the time was the athletic director.
He's a legendary coach at Manchester.
Legendary athletic director, coach. Yep. The stadium's named after him. So after a bunch of people called and hounded, they opened up one more interview spot, and I got the call to come interview. And I came down. I met with 3 people. It was Lloyd Swellness, who was the athletic director at the time, Pete Costi, who was the principal, and our assistant principal, Don Skeen, who was the longtime assistant coach for Joel Hicks at Pulaski High School. Yeah. And it was just one of those things where I interviewed for like over 3 hours. And it's just like us talking here. And I'll never forget driving back to my parents' house in Chester and going in and saying, man, they're going to offer me this daggone job. I know they are. And sure enough, I mean, the interview was perfect. And two days later, I get a call from Lloyd said, "You ready to come be the Lansing football coach?"
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "That's awesome." I said, give me a day to let me talk it over with my wife." So I go the next day. I go to the principal at Buffalo Gap, say, "Look, I just got offered the biggest school in Richmond. They just offered me the job. I really want to stay here." He goes, "Well, we're just not ready to hire anyone yet." And I said, "Okay, well,
So who did they end up hiring?
um, they ended up hiring a guy that was a head coach at, I forgot what his name was, but he was a head coach at one of the small schools around that area. He ended up winning a state championship a couple years later there.
Yeah.
So he was, so anyway, I got the job, and it was crazy. So that June I turned 29. So I was in my 20s when I got the job,
And
and
that's when I became a head coach when I was 29.
right, and it's
And that's 1999.
yep. So this year will be year 25 at Manchester. So it's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, so that story just, I know it's kind of all over the place, but it kind of shows you where just because you have a plan to go this way, sometimes you might have to take a bypass to get back on that track. And the bypasses and the beltways and everything that I've had in my life have put me right back to where I need to be right here. It's just so fortunate the people that you come in contact with that have such, and they might not know it at that point, and you might not know it at that point, but so many of those people have had such a huge impact on who I am as a coach, who I am as a person. Um, and it's just like everything's done for a reason. You might want something right now, but God's going to be like, you know what? It's not time for you to have that right now. This
Yeah.
is how you respond to this, and this go down here. I mean, it's been a crazy ride. It's been enjoyable. It's been, I mean, coaching life is roller coaster. I mean, we can't all be like, to come into a place and instantly, you know, win 10 games every year. I mean, it's a process, man. I mean, it's something that, and people don't understand that. If you're going to build something, and like whenever I decide to leave Manchester, it's like your child, because you said it earlier. It wasn't like we took over a program that was winning 9, 10 games every year. It's a process, but anything worth having is going to be worth working for. But it was
Yeah.
awesome because after I got that job, Stuart Sink, you said, logged on earlier. Stuart came over with me. Matt Bland came over with me. Burl Fisher came over with me. Those are three guys that were either that played
And
for.
Earl Fisher, right?
Yes, both of
Both
them.
the
Both the
twins.
boys came over. Gail Parker, who I mentioned earlier from Franklin, was driving from Southampton County back and forth to help me out. Um, it's just amazing. Then I retained one coach that was on the previous staff. That was Greg Woodle.
Mm-hmm.
And the first year, I mean, it was crazy. We the very first game, my very first game as a head coach, we're playing Thomas Dale. Vic Williams, legendary coach Vic Williams. And it's just like, oh my God, you get this task, this huge task at hand. And we went over there to Dale and beat Thomas Dale. And then we beat Prince George, and then we beat someone else, and all of a sudden we're sitting at 3-0, running the split
Yeah.
back there that everyone's like, oh my God, what is this about? And then we go face Huguenot, the legendary Richard McPhee, and
Mm-hmm.
funny story, funny story about that game. It's like, they's like, you're not going to go, you don't want to go up in the locker room at Huguenot. You don't want to, you want to avoid the crowd. And I'm like, why? Well, that's what we've always done in the past. We don't want to go through that. I'm like, well, why? So they never would answer why. And I'm like, we get to Huguenot. They say, Coach, where do you want to go? I said, I want to go up to the locker room up there. And, the place was packed. I mean, back then people don't understand it.
I mean, David Terrell was a senior, I believe, that year.
All right. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
he was made Tom Brady at Michigan. I mean, he
Yeah.
was number 9 pick, I think, overall for the
Oh
Chicago
yeah,
Bears.
they were loaded. They were loaded. And Huguenot, back in the day, man, you go to Huguenot, place is packed.
Yeah, the thrill and force still.
Oh my God, the smell of their food, like they were freaking, like they had the Huguenot in the past would have like the best fish sandwiches. You remember?
Yeah, I
It
remember.
was
I remember a
just,
lot of places that had good fat fish sandwiches.
yeah. So like we're trying to get the buses unloaded, and I had, I had a couple managers, and I'm like, where are my girls at, man? And they were up there throwing down like fish sandwiches while we were trying to unload the bus. Anyway, so we go over there to Huguenot, and we ended up being in a dogfight, but we turned the ball over 4 times inside the 10-yard line, fumbled the ball, and we ended up losing that game. And we're actually 4-0 at the time because it was our 5th game.
Was that because of the Baden balls? What's the story about the Baden balls?
Oh my God. Yeah. So anyway, we ended up losing the game, but yeah, the Baden. Yes, the Baden came out with the who popped that up there?
No, nobody popped it up there. I'm just asking you about it because I want it documented.
Oh my God, the Baden ball, they would sell it. They would like dunk it in a bucket of water, and it was like tacky.
It was composite. It was a composite.
The composite ball that was like, it's virtually fumble free. Well, we proved that night that it wasn't fumble free, but I don't. Yeah, it was severe, but it was. We were lucky enough. We salvaged the season and finished 5-5, which they hadn't won 5 games in a few years. But it's just been a process. It's been a. And
I want to ask you about. You're a coach, but you're young, and you got the Manchester job, and some people they're in love with the uniforms, and LC Bird was there. And that was where you played. And did you feel like you were being disloyal at all, or did you have any loyalty to Bird when you took the Manchester job?
Well, it was the first couple of years it's always weird playing against your high school. It was always weird. Did I feel like I was being disloyal? No. It's funny because after my first year at Manchester is when Paulette retired. And a lot of people told me I needed to put in for that job.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't. And I didn't feel like it was the right thing to do if I was sitting there preaching all this stuff to the kids at Manchester and then a year from then flip it. And it was funny because I was at a coaches conference at the University of Richmond and just finished listening to Chippy Chappell talk about the straight T. And for those people don't know, Chippy Chappell is the second all-time winningest coach in Virginia history.
Yeah, behind Mike Smith. I mean, he won like James River District. I mean, he went 20 years without losing a district game or something.
Yeah, from Central Lunenburg. And so anyway, I was sitting there listening to him, and I saw a buddy of mine who we had been doing the interview circuit throughout the state of Virginia. I saw him at Cortland. I saw him at Patrick Henry of Roanoke. I saw him at King George. These are all jobs that he and I both applied for. And I said, hey, you might want to put in for my old high school because Coach Paulette's retiring. And I said, I think it'd be a great fit for you. Well, lo and behold, it's, David Bidwell gets the job, and the rest is history. He goes on to win 3 state championships and did an awesome job there. So it was just
it's just crazy that y'all were the young coaches. Y'all were the up and comers. Y'all were the next generation. And there's a next generation now out there that might be watching this or will watch this. And those coaches like Lou Anderson and Coach Waters and Coach Schrotenborough and those guys that mentored y'all and passed the torch. I mean, I'd say we're going to pass the torch to them, Tom. And
I'm going to be passing a whole lot sooner than you are. You're a whole lot younger than me, but it's crazy. I mean, I was sitting there listening to you and Criswell doing it the other day, and there's just so many. Y'all were throwing out names. Well, the names. If you think about some of the great coaches in this area, it's amazing. Dave Cooper, and just talking about in our county, Dave Cooper, Ted Salmon, John Iannucci, who was at Midlothian, Billy Jarvis, who was at Manchester when I was in high school, Vic Williams, and then Pat Manuel. It's really
Joel Hicks.
Joel Hicks. Yeah. I mean, just so many great coaches that, it's still pretty cool. We have the All Metro banquet coming up. We get to see guys like Rusty Curl, who was at Tucker High School forever. Jim Woodson, who was at Powhatan. It's been very fortunate. I've been very fortunate to not only play against those guys, but actually coach against those guys. And hopefully, down the road, there's going to be some other young coach that's going to say the same thing. We got to play against Coach Taylor and Coach Hall, but now, getting a chance to coach against them. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
I want to tell you a memory I have. Y'all were playing. It was one of y'all's first 1 or 2 years at Manchester, but y'all were playing at Bird. Was that your first year at Manchester?
I'm not sure. No, I think the first we played Bird at Manchester. I don't know.
It might have been the second year, but I remember your coaching staff having the gray T-shirts, and how I thought that y'all's team. Just watching y'all's defense. I mean, heck, man, I'm probably like in college, and I came back to watch Coach Bland coach, and he'd always talked about you, and I knew you, but I just thought, man, that team is nasty. Like, they are one of the nastiest football teams I've ever seen, especially on defense. And that's when you gave Coach Bland his first opportunity to be defensive coordinator, and he kind of came up with that smaller defensive line, slanting and stuff that he's known for. But it was fun to watch because it was such a young staff and it had so much energy,
right?
And it was so much different than what everybody else was doing,
right?
I mean, it was just, that was one of my memories. And I went over to the bus, and right there as you walk through the fence like you're the visiting team, and y'all were getting on the bus, and Coach Bland was distraught because y'all had lost to Bird, but I still have that memory, man.
Those first couple of years, man, it was you don't build a house. The first thing you build, when you're building a house, you don't put the roof on. I mean, it's the foundation. And those first 2 or 3 years at Manchester, man, I tell you, we couldn't do the things that we did back then. Now, those kids, we put them through so much. And it's just, and it's funny because a couple of those guys are on my staff now, those early year guys. And, but yeah, it was, we had to basically teach those guys the importance of work ethic, the importance of winning, the importance of working together, and just sacrificing everything that, all the words that coaches use, when you're building a program, man, you better, you
just can't preach it. You got to live it.
You got to live it, man. You got to live it. And we had a little weight room at the time that was like attached to the field house. And, I know that was one of my main things I talked about in my interview, is changing the culture and changing the way Manchester football was seen in the 804 and in the state of Virginia. And I'm like, we would call it prison yard lifting, man. We would have weights out in the breezeway, and it was just not safe. And so we started raising money, and that's how we came to building the weight facility that we have, which is, again, it's one of those things that I'm like super proud of that facility. It's just, you've been in there.
Your name should be on that building, man.
On that metal building.
Yeah, it should be. It should be called the Tom Hall, strength facility or weight room.
Right.
You should have your name on it, man, because you built that junk, and with those parents, and y'all sacrificed. And just talk a little bit about that, because you always have coaches who, they have an idea or they want to build, y'all built a weight room. I mean, it's basically a huge airplane shed, and y'all put the foundation and you fundraise for it.
Mhm.
Talk a little bit about that whole process.
Well, I mean, it was just again, coming into a school that's been around since I don't know, you probably know this, probably the 1920s, maybe.
Yeah, it had been in different locations.
Yeah,
Basically moved away from the city.
right.
As so
But
you were in a new school. It was built. Manchester's new building was built in 1993.
three, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so Manchester is one of those schools that's been around. It's like Manchester, Midlow, Thomas Dale were the three oldest schools in Chesterfield, and then you have the Highland Springs, the Varanas, the Freemans, Hermitage, all that stuff on the other side of the river. But yeah, I mean, coming into this newer facility, there was no weight room.
Yeah.
There was no football boosters club. So, I went to the athletic boosters club and sitting around, and all the parents at this athletic boosters club were football parents. And I'm like, dude, why are we raising money for the tennis team? All right. We need to have our own. So we decided, we went out and got our own 501(c) and created a Manchester football boosters and came up with a plan, what we needed to get done and raise the money. It took us about 3 years to raise the money for the building, the concrete, and everything. And it's just kind of evolved after, the biggest thing was getting the building up, having a place for us.
How big is the building for those that aren't, they're not familiar?
1,000 square feet. So it's 80 feet long by 60 feet wide. All right. And it's just, and it's, with 30-foot ceilings. I mean, it's just a metal shed that has been,
It's been integral to y'all's program. I mean, what
it
year was
is.
that built?
I mean, it's what changed our program. I mean, and the kids buy into it, and they know, if you're a young person and you're going to play for a high school, no matter what sport, you need to train with your teammates and your coaches. You have so many kids that are going and doing, well, I'm going with this trainer, I'm going with this trainer. Well, is your trainer part of my staff? No. I mean, we have a facility where you can come and, anyway. But yeah, we got that built, and we've done every kind of fundraiser that you can think of, man. I mean, we raffled a car one year, and we made just enough money to pay for the car. We didn't make anything as far as
Did the person that won the car, did they donate it back to the school? Because that
no,
happened at James River High School, where
no,
the guy who won it actually donated it back, so they got like double the money.
no,
Yeah,
no,
that
no.
was weird.
Won our car, sold it, and pocketed the money. So no, it was a great idea, but no, we've done everything just like every high school coach, man. You've got to raise funds because of the little money that the county does give you to run your program. I mean, you just and that's what people don't understand. When we have our interest meeting for parents and players, parents don't realize that a football helmet's over $400. Like one single football is like $120 now. They don't understand the concept of cost. And if you have 150 kids in a program, I mean, you do the math. I mean, you're not going to put a cheap helmet on them, because if you do that, you're setting yourself up for,
I don't even know if they sell a cheap helmet.
you're right. But you know what I mean. But yeah, you
Yeah.
got to spend the money on equipment to protect the kids. But anyway.
So, just thinking about the whole process of you being there at Manchester, you talked about the weight room, and y'all always hung your hat on that. But I think like one of the biggest turning points at Manchester was you getting the guy that you talked about earlier, son, to join your staff, and you gave away, you relinquished control
Yeah.
of the offense. And that was really, I think, probably the next big step
Yeah.
in y'all's program. So can you talk a little bit about Sydney and Chippy and how that all came about? Because I mean, I think that's important.
Yeah, it was huge. I talked earlier about meeting, going to listening to Chippy Chapel talk. Well, anyway, he has a son named Sidney Chapel, and after the first couple of years of running the split back veer, we kind of graduated to running more of what we were comfortable running like what we did at Bird and at Tech, and
You had Cavell Connor,
we
who,
did. We
who
ran football.
was an NFL football player and played at Clemson.
Right. We were big up front. We had a big running back, and we had a quarterback that was pretty savvy. But we were starting to play around with some spread formations and everything. So,
well, what year is this we're talking about when all this happened?
I'm thinking it's probably.
I mean, Coach Burton left.
Well, I'm going to get to him. So
okay.
When did he leave?
He left the year that Mike Lennon took the.
Right, but you remember what year he left? Wasn't it
I'm gonna have to walk backwards because
like 2010 maybe somewhere around there.
Lauren took the job at Highland Springs in 2008, so it was around 2007.
Okay,
2007 season was when Coach Burton left to go to Marietta. Coach Burton was the head coach, a young up and coming head coach, just like Coach Hall.
Right.
He was the guy that got kids recruited, and he was the head coach at Highland Springs, and he left and went to Marietta, Georgia to be the head coach.
Right. So it's funny. So we were playing around like the 05, 06, 07 season. We started playing around with, spreading the field. And I really didn't understand. I knew about.
We didn't understand it, man. I mean, we came from the power I. We came from the T formation.
Right.
Boom, ISO and power.
Right. Old offensive lineman. That's what I like. And so I just started doing research on. We've got all these athletes at Manchester. We got all these kids coming out.
The school was changing. I mean, Manchester, it was becoming more diverse, more athletes.
Right.
But I wanted to say this before you get going on, Sydney. You told me when I was a young head coach, I mean, you've always mentored me. You said, Troy, when you become a head coach, because, I mean, I started coaching in 2000 at Coach at Bird, and then I went to Meadowbrook High School as an assistant, 01, 02, 03, won the state championship 04, and then 05, 06, 07. That was the time when I was getting ready, thinking about being a head coach, and I went to Amelia in 08. And you told me, you said, Troy, you're going to have a hard time finding assistant coaches that are as dedicated as you.
Right.
I don't know if you remember me telling me this outside of y'all's weight room.
Right.
And you also told me about Amelia and about coaching at a small school.
Uh-huh.
And, me and my brother went there. So talk a little bit about Sydney, though. I just wanted to throw that in there for everybody.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of hit on all that. So anyway, so we were thinking about kind of incorporating the spread into what we were doing. And so it's funny because you mentioned Scott Burton. So I went to the Nike clinic up in Maryland, and Scott was the keynote speaker, and he was talking about the spread. And so we sat around and listened to him, and then we've known each other for a while. And I said, well, Scott, this is what I'm doing. I'm thinking about incorporating that with this and this. And he looked at me, and this like burns in my mind. He goes, Tom, you can't date the spread. You got to marry it. And I'm like, oh my God. And so meaning, you can sit there and I think too many young coaches try to do things.
Yeah, do too much.
You're going to commit to the spread, then be the spread guy.
You got to hang your hat on something.
You got to hang your hat on something. And so that just burned in my, I just kept on like hit me. And so I'm like, look, I'm sitting there talking to myself. I'm not gonna be able to do this. And so Stuart Sink, his neighbor who lived across the street from him, was Sidney Chappell, the son of Chippy Chappell, who has been on Scott Burton's staff at Highland Springs. And Stuart was like, I think Sidney would be open to coming and talking to you. And I'm like, well, God Almighty, this get this guy. So I met him.
I mean, because he's driving all the way, for y'all that don't know. I mean, he's driving 45 minutes to near the airport where Coach lives in the middle of Chesterfield County.
Right.
So I mean, that cut down his commute.
Correct. And so as soon as I met Sidney, it was like instant. I'm like, I knew, all right, this guy. I mean, he and I are gonna work well together. And so I sat down with him and I told him, I'm like, look, I want you to come run your offense. And I'm gonna coach offensive line. You got the offense. You come, you take it. And I don't know if he believed me at first, but I mean, he was in for it, man. I mean, he came on and he's been with me ever since. I
And
mean,
what year is this you're talking about?
where it's like '09 maybe.
So it was when I went back to Meadowbrook to be the head coach.
Right. It's after when Scott left. When Scott left to go to Marietta is when Sydney came over with us.
So it would have been '08 would have been his first season there.
Yeah.
So
And
that was when I was at Amelia as the head coach, and
right.
then Meadowbrook had Morgan Moses.
Right. Right. So we went over to it, and it's kind of evolved, just like everything. But he's been at the helm, and I mean, I want him to be at the helm, and I had no, like a lot of coaches would have egos about that. Dude, it's about winning football. It's about winning football games and
knowing your strengths and your weaknesses.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I was not a spread guy, and he was, and just kind of you flip it over to the defensive side, man. I was fortunate to hire Jason Harrell as my defensive coordinator.
And what year was that?
That was it's funny. I think it was after the 16 season, maybe the 17 season, he took over, and I think his first year calling our defense was the state championship year, and we gave up 70 points in 15 games. That's two coordinators that we're not Manchester football the way it's been the last decade without those two guys.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just and then not just that. I mean, it's just it's I mean, our staff, we've been together for a long time, and we try to add people to it as we go, and it's been good, man. I mean, it's we've added 5 more coaches to it this year, guys that played for me there. But no, man, it's talking about young coaches, and I tell what I told you when you were looking for your first head job. That's still the biggest challenge. We've had a lot of jobs open in this area this year. The Clover Hill job, the Meadowbrook job just came back open. Midlothian came open, which was a shocker. Tucker, Henrico, Mills Godwin, all those jobs. The toughest thing for those coaches is going to be to find assistant coaches because that are all in.
And we only have, what is it, the head coach and 5 assistant supplements in Chesterfield, something crazy like that. And we're going to do a podcast about, coaches pay in Chesterfield and assistant coach supplements. I mean, something has to change. So we're going to talk about that at another time.
Right.
But, with Sydney coming and taking over, and then, Brennan Clark, being the ball boy, and Brennan Clark then becoming your quarterback. Talk a little bit about that, because that, just to put things in perspective for me and anybody that's watching this, like, I was at Meadowbrook as an assistant for a long time, and then I went to Amelia, then I came back as the head coach, which is, Meadowbrook's a school that borders Manchester, and we had a pretty good program for a decade. And, I was the head coach from '09 to 2014, and then I felt like it was time for a change. And I went to Virginia Union for 3 years. And, my brother, who it seemed like, Tom, you always wanted us to come coach, for you. Yeah, right. Because you loved us and you knew we were Bird guys and you knew that we could help. But my brother actually got a chance to come coach for you. But, let's talk. But so that's kind of putting things in timeline. Like my brother came when I left Meadowbrook, and that's when Brennan Clark came. But Brennan had already been your ball boy. And Brennan, for y'all that don't know, he signed with Notre Dame, then went to ODU. But he led Manchester to a state championship his senior year. So just talk a little bit about Brennan, Tom.
Yeah, so Brendan's parents and my wife and I have been friends forever. I mean, I played high school ball against Roy Clark. Roy played at Clover Hill. Both his parents went to Ferrum College with my wife.
Wow.
And
I didn't know that.
No, it's crazy. And when we moved back from Buffalo Gap, when we moved back to Chesterfield, we got our youngest daughter into ballet at like the Jessica Morgan School of Dance. So we go in for the first time.
On Hall Street.
Right there on Hall Street, right there in the Deer Run, right around Deer Run area. And we go in for her first class, and there's Roy and Sandy Clark with their daughter, Jordan, who's in the same class as our daughter Lindsay, and they're holding their infant son, Brendan Clark. And
So
so,
what year is this?
um,
It's got to be 99 or around.
it's probably like 2000,
Okay.
probably 2000, 2001. So it was like Jordan and Lindsay instantly become buddies and doing the dance thing together. And as they get older, they start playing softball together. And Brendan, he's with them and with us no matter wherever we go. So it was funny. So you flash forward 5 or 6 years, we're in Charlottesville for a softball tournament because, our daughters all played travel softball, even at a young age. And we're in Charlottesville, and Brendan had a soccer ball. Roanoke, thank you. My wife just screamed.
Yeah, bring her over here so to ask her to come on just for a second,
Yeah.
just
So
to say hi.
We're in Roanoke, and he had a soccer ball. And I'm like, no, the hell no. I'm not going to have a soccer ball. So we go down to the Walmart, and lo and behold, they have an orange and blue Nerf ball, football. I get it. I take it to him. I'm like, I took the soccer ball and threw it away. Gave him the football. And I said, we're going to learn how to do this. And so the kid just, everywhere he went from then on, he had a football, just throwing it. So I think he was like 7 or 8 years old. I made him our ball boy. And he was throwing the football, the high school football, from the sideline out to midfield to the referees. And the referee was just like, what in the world? I'm like, yeah, my future quarterback.
Yeah. So, I mean, you planted the seed, and you knew that one day he would be your quarterback.
I did.
It's the perfect storm. I mean, like you said, it all works out.
And sure enough, so he was always around Manchester football. Even before he was, from a little, when he got to middle school, he would come down and watch us practice before he had to go to Little League practice. So he was always around it. And so luckily, when he came up as an 8th grader, he led our JV team. They were 9-1. They ended up losing to Bird the last game of the year. But as an 8th grader,
I remember that. I think I was at Meadowbrook at the time.
You were
eighth grader, and he beat our
JV
team bad.
Right. And then so as a 9th grader, he became the starting varsity quarterback for us, and then ends up hurting his leg, tore his ACL, and missed half the season. We kind of limped into the playoffs that year. And then his junior, senior year, he led us to the regional championship every year. His sophomore year, we lost to Colonial Forge on a Saturday at Manchester. His junior year, we lost to Colonial Forge on a cold Friday night up there. His senior year, we beat Colonial Forge. And it's been, his senior year was one of those magical years. I mean, wasn't just about Brendan. I mean, we had, that was a pretty good football team. But he led us, and he ended up being Offensive Player of the Year and State Player of the Year, and signed with Notre Dame. And it's he's going to always be known as one of the best that's ever come out of this area. That's for sure.
No, I totally agree. I want to ask you about my brother, then I want to ask you about Greg Woodle, because he's been there the whole time with you.
Yeah.
But I think I could be totally wrong, and you can correct me, but I really believe that another turning point in your program, we said it was the weight room. We said it was, getting Sydney and then Brendan Clark. But I think another big thing that led you and helped you was, my brother coming over there with you to Manchester, because, me and my brother, we've always been a team. We've always been together. And, we coached at Bird together, Meadowbrook together, Amelia together, back to Meadowbrook together. I mean, me and him, probably him and Shane Reynolds, probably they know more about me as a football coach and how I think about things than anyone. And with my brother coming over there with you at that time, it's like almost the perfect storm, and like everything was just going y'all's way. So just talk a little bit about, I'm going to cry, man. Talk a little bit about my brother, man.
Well, I mean, it's just, so Tony joining us was like was like the final piece of the puzzle we were looking for. I mean, we had a really good staff with all of our guys, but bringing Tony over just gave us a little extra fire and vinegar. And so not only Tony coming over, but Brent Johnson coming with us. I mean, those two guys together, it's like freaking frack, man. I mean, those guys work together as a team, and they're amazing coaches, amazing relationships they build with the kids.
Yeah, Brent. I want to talk a little bit about Brent. Just Brent Johnson was a player of ours at Meadowbrook, and I mean, he was an 8th grader when we won the state championship in 04, and he was a player for us. He was an undersized D lineman. They got after the quarterback, and he's. I mean, I've had a lot of them. I mean, they don't get the best grades in school, but they know more football than most of the coaches, and they have a high football IQ. And sometimes those are the best coaches. They're not the most talented, but they know the game.
Yeah.
And what Brent was able to do at Meadowbrook, and then to go over there with y'all at Manchester, and my brother, like you said, my brother brings that swag, and he's amazing with players. So yeah, I mean, just talk a little bit about Tony, man. Because I mean, Shane Reynolds says that my brother is amazing. Like he is amazing, an amazing football coach, and he's underrated. But just talk a little bit about Tony.
I asked Tony every year to come back with us. Even when he was coaching with you, I asked him to come back with us. I mean, I miss him. I think not just from his X's and O's, but I think his nature and how he is with the kids outside of football is what makes him so special, because he can relate to, I mean, obviously to everyone, but there's a certain type of kid that kind of gravitates to Tony. And that's what I loved about having him on staff. He would be the big, gentle giant most of the time, but then you would get this fiery side of him that we would have to kind of watch out on the sideline, because sometimes that gets you in trouble. But that's what I loved about him. And it was just like I said, with he and Brent, and then I mean our staff with Kevin Connor, who played for me, and who's actually back with us again this year, which is going to be huge. And then we had another former player, Josh Alford, on that state championship team that was our running back coach, and I miss him. I miss him so much to be on our staff. And then obviously Sydney and Jason, Mike McIntyre, who was the longtime defensive coordinator with Billy Jarvis at Hermitage and at War Hill. I mean, he's on our staff. I mean, it's Dan Griles and Mike Strader. And I mean, we just, Chris Anderson, all these guys, we've been together forever. But adding Tony to that, it was just like, I mean,
what did Tony do that you didn't already know before? Or what, I mean, was there anything that he brought to the table that you maybe were not aware of? Maybe something we were doing at Meadowbrook, or how he coached? I mean, was there anything?
I think what Tony brings is just a different approach. I mean, you guys, for anyone that knows 804 football, you and Tony, the twins, you were everywhere in your younger years. I mean, you would take, and Bill Bowles did a great job. He and Dewey did an amazing job at Meadowbrook. But you guys were a lot of the legwork. And that's what I was always fascinated with what you guys, your energy that you brought, just you guys would take kids from Meadowbrook and they'd be everywhere. You would take them to colleges, you would take them to camps, and it was always high energy. And that's what I was always attracted to you guys as coaches. And I wanted that energy on my staff. I wanted to be able to, because everyone can't be like that. You know what I'm saying? You got to have different personalities.
Yeah, because you got guys who's got wives, you got guys that's got kids.
You do.
I mean, those young coaches, they really can be beneficial to a program, because at a time, Tom, this, like, you don't have your own kids. So some of those kids that you coach, they are your kids, and you're their dad, and you're their brother, and you're their everything. and you're their everything, and they're your everything. You know,
Right.
some of the people, man, I'm getting emotional thinking about
That's good, but
it. John Graves.
that's your passion. But that's and that's what. And again, my wife and kids, and they I mean, if they had a softball game, I was going to go do that. But I knew I had other guys that would step up. But that's what
It's a team effort. It's a
right.
team effort.
Correct. Tony brought that energy in his own way. He was there in the weight room every day. He lives right down the road from Manchester. It was really cool. And again, from knowing you guys back since you were like 14 or 15, I mean, it was like an instant connection. And my guys, I mean, our coaches, I let them coach. And I'm never going to be that head coach that has my hand in everything, because I don't think that gives my coaches a sense of self-worth. I want them to bring their own energy, their ideas within our program, and just take it and run. I'm not going to sit there and say you have to do this or you have to do that. And I think that's what attracted Tony. I let him be Tony. Just Brent, go be Brent, go coach. And have that type of relationship that you want to build with your kids. And I mean, it was great.
I want to say something, because I can't remember who told me this. I think it might have been the O-line coach of South Carolina when Lou Holtz was the head coach. He said, I wasn't even a head coach then, but he said, are you the type of head coach that gives your players to your assistants, or are you the head coach that lets your assistants borrow your players?
Right.
Some coaches give their assistants to their players, like you. Then there's some guys who let the assistants borrow them. They
Right.
borrow them for individual, but then they're theirs.
Right.
You understand that?
I do.
What does that mean? Is that like being a micromanager? What does that whole thing I'm saying right there mean? We've been talking for an hour and 30 minutes. We could probably talk all day, but I mean, what we're saying is important.
Yeah,
it's probably never been said before that way.
Right. I think that if you're a head coach, you need to give your players to their position coaches, and at the same time, you need to give those players that coach. I mean, I don't want to be an umbrella coach. I never will be an umbrella coach. If we're doing a certain thing, I trust my guys that they're going to go do what we had planned. And again, I've been very fortunate not to have to be an umbrella guy, but there's some guys out there that are, and it works for them. I mean, I don't know if there's any right or wrong reason. I just say for me, I've always wanted my guys to have a sense of ownership, and I don't want them. It's never about me, and it never will be about me. It's always about us. And I think that that's how I was as a player. In fact, I know it was, and that's how I've been as a head coach. I think for 24 years, it's an us thing. It's never about me. I think anytime a coach wins a head coach of the year, I think it's a staff of the year. And I think I said that in 18 when I was like named Virginia, whatever. That's a staff thing. That's not a me thing. And it's never going to be a me thing. And I think coaches that make it a me thing, you're going to have a very short career.
Because like I've said this. If you watch any of the other podcasts, I think I've asked almost every coach this. There was a guy that asked me. He said, where my previous two jobs, I could relate to the kids and they could relate to me, but on this job, kids look at me and they say, well, you don't understand me, or you don't look like me, or you're trying to change me. And like Puka said in the Chilcote interview that Coach Chilcote told him, that's why I have you, Puka. So he's actually empowering Coach Puka, giving him ownership. And that coach that said that, he's probably letting his assistants borrow the players.
No
he's
question.
not giving them to his assistants. He might not trust them. But I mean, have you ever had a kid say that to you? And how do you get around that? Because you have players that they may be from somewhere else, or I mean, you got a guy right now, Kittrell Clark, who he was from Richmond. I know he played for you before, but I mean, he's getting ready to get probably drafted in the NFL.
Yeah.
I mean, is that where Tom, your assistant coaches can help, or what?
I think it's they. I mean, this is going to be really cliche, but that old saying, "It takes a village." It is so true. I mean, am I going to relate to every kid like on a personal level? No. I mean, but you have coaches that can, and you make sure. I mean, we've had like Trey Clark. A great story. So Trey, my wife taught Trey at Crenshaw. I've known Trey Clark forever. Trey's always been a different type of kid. So Trey played for us as a freshman and sophomore. Got into a struggle with one of his parents. Parent was divorced. Parent made him go live with the other parent, and he had to go to a city school his junior year, where he basically had to fight, and just it was not a great situation. Convinced the original parent to be able to come back home. Came back, had an amazing senior year, and went to Liberty, transferred to Louisville, and probably is going to be a first or second round draft pick. I mean, he lit it up this week at the Shrine Bowl. But Trey was a kid that again, he was a lot of our kids, Troy, have been around our program since they were little, because we do so many.
That's that community. That's that community. It is. That's that rec program. Y'all have that rec programs that feed directly into y'all.
We do. And so like all of our kids, and I shouldn't say all, but the majority of our kids have been, around our program. And we try to make, we have, every school has Little League night, but like every Friday is kind of like Little League night at Manchester. And that's where I've always wanted it, because I want those kids to be excited to one day. Like that's why we walk down from our practice field. We walk down that hill because I want those little kids lined up as our players are walking down, because I want them to think, I can't wait for that to be me one day. Mm-hmm. And then as my kids are walking down that hill, they can look over and say, I remember when that was me, So as far as, I don't know, man, as far as relating to kids, I feel like even though I'm an old 54-year-old guy right now, I still feel like I'm pretty in touch with what guys go through. And if I'm not, I'm going to make daggone sure that one of my coaches can relate to that kid. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, I mean, now, you're not the young coach anymore. You're the Coach Strotenboer. So how did Coach Strotenboer do it?
He had Coach Waters. He had Coach Paulette. And he brought some young guys from Michigan that played for them. I can't remember their names, but I mean,
it's not one coach; it's a team.
It is, yeah. I mean,
so the Bird football program, the Manchester football program. We always say, like, I mean, nobody made Bird, which Coach Strotenboer probably did, but Bird made a lot of people.
Correct. Well, and that's it. I mean, and if again, it's not about one coach; it's always about the staff. And that's why it's so important. That's why the hardest thing, man, is anytime someone takes a job, you better make sure you have in place a plan to get a group of people that are going to have the similar values. And you notice I didn't say same, because you're never going to have the same values, but you better have the same mindset and everything moving forward.
Yeah. I want to ask you about Greg Woodle, because Greg, he was there before you. He was there as assistant coach with you, and then he became the AD.
Yep.
And then I want to talk to you a little bit about, like, I didn't talk to my brother for 2 years, so like I want to talk about that too. So talk a little bit about Greg Woodle. I mean, he's a college umpire, he's a coach, he's the AD. I mean, he's pretty remarkable.
Greg was a guy. I had to convince Greg to stay on, because Greg was on the previous staff before I got the job. I took him out to lunch because I felt like I needed him to stay on because I felt like the kids we were just talking about, they really respected him and liked him. So I convinced him to stay on. He ended up becoming my defensive coordinator forever. And now he's taken over as the athletic director. I mean, just a great friend, someone that I know always will have my back. I would always have his back. Just he helped me as a young coach in the transition. He was always kind of my voice of reason because when you're in your 20s, you're just full of all these ideas and you want to go head first, but sometimes you got to sit back and think. But he was, yeah, man, it's just a true blessing. I've been able to work for some great people. Pete Costi ranks right up there with Aubrey Lindsay, who I talked about earlier, was the principal at Bird. Pete Costi, man, the greatest principal a person can work for, not just a coach, but I mean, he was amazing.
Why is that? Is it support? It's support, wanting to be good, believing in you.
Everything, Troy. I mean,
it's really, but I want to say this because John Gordon told me this. When you're an administrator, your coaches and your teachers are like your players.
Yeah.
And it's not the kids. The kids are not your players. That if you're an administrator, you're a coach.
Yeah.
And your teachers and your coaches are your players. So it seems like to be a great administrator, it's almost like being a great coach. Because you gotta believe in your teachers, you gotta believe in your players, and you gotta get them to buy into what you're doing. And you gotta make them feel like they're a part of it.
Right there. So, that's it. They've got, your players have got to buy into what you do. It's the same thing with teachers. For an administrator, you have so many. You know how things are now. It's not like they used to be. I mean, getting people to buy in now, post COVID, has been a hard sell. I would not want to be an administrator this day and age, but Pete Costi was exactly what you just said. He was a guy that he would get everyone on board. And I mean, he was a great coach. And I'm talking about that.
So was he a coach before he became an administrator?
He was a coach and he was an athletic director before he became a principal.
At Manchester?
No, at Midlothian. Okay. So, he had been around, he's been there forever, but yeah, he was amazing. My principal now, Christy Ellis, she is a great lady to work for. She's a Manchester grad.
So is my principal too. I want to make everybody know that, Ms. Blanton's the best.
Yeah.
Work hard, play hard, take care of each other, man. That's her philosophy.
Yeah. And then, obviously early on having Lloyd Swanis, who again been a coach. And then Roger Chasm, the coach that I followed for Manchester, became the athletic director. Now it's Greg Woodle. So I've been pretty fortunate. I really have been pretty fortunate through my years.
Yeah. So I talked to Coach Cheetah about this this morning. The corners coach Derek Jones at Virginia Tech. Coaching is a fraternity, but I mean, I went 2 years and didn't talk to my twin brother, who was basically like my best friend, my right-hand man, because I felt like we had kids that transferred to Manchester, and, my brother was a part of that. And I didn't talk to him for 2 years over this. Right. So but, I've had a lot of beefs and I've had a lot of disagreements with people. But it seems like almost in the end, I don't know if it's me or it's them. But I guess we come to an understanding that we want what's best for kids. Right. And, even me and CJ Scott talked on the phone recently, and congratulations to him for getting the Huguenot job. But, me and him's had issues and disagreements, but we talked it out, and, we're on good terms. And I mean, the list is very long.
Right.
And I guess when you're like Lauren told me, in 2009, when I got the job at Meadowbrook, he said, Troy, you're a competitor. And because you're a competitor, some people don't like you.
Right.
And I mean, it's funny that he said that. He's like, let's remain friends through this all.
Right.
And Lauren knows this. We didn't remain friends, and it wasn't until a few years ago that we made right. And I guess it's because he's got a good heart and I got a good heart, and we want what's best for kids. But
Right.
there's a mutual respect there. So how do you feel about that? Because there's a younger generation of coach that they're on Twitter and they see it as I'm trying to get this player, or no one. And I said this on the radio, no one lost more players to transfer than you last season. And probably nobody got more transfers than you the year that you won the state championship. But I mean, this year you played for the regional championship and you lost a lot of players. So like what's on your heart on that, Tom? Because dude, like Shane said, Troy, I don't know if you should do this, because if anybody watches me on YouTube or watched any interview that I've ever really done, I'm one way.
Right.
But they don't really get to see the real me. And this is
Right.
I'm being genuine right now.
So let me this talk about the whole transfer thing. That's been established years ago. I mean, shoot, when we first started this podcast, I talked about my father physically moved my family because of decisions that I made.
Yeah.
Right. Bird was accused of recruiting me back then. Okay. So that's one of those things that
there's been, I mean, you and Coach Bland had a disagreement over kids transferring and stuff. So I mean, this is not new.
It's not new. And everyone's going to be affected by it. And here's the thing. You're going to, as a coach, you're going to coach the ones who are with you. You can't convince people, because as a parent, you always think the grass is always greener on the other side. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it's artificial. But you're never going to know that until you're not going to ever convince. If a parent has thoughts of leaving your program, my program, any program, they're gone. And you know what? Good luck to you. It is what it is. We're going to coach who we have, and we're still going to be successful, because when the program is solid, you're going to be successful. And
you don't hang your hat on a player. You don't hang your hat on a year. Like my dad used to say all the time, the great teams, they win no matter what. It isn't because they had a great group of seniors.
Correct.
He's from Appalachia High School. I mean, Appalachia won more games than almost anybody other than Hampton. And I don't know, they might be up there with Lunenburg, but it's not even a school anymore.
Right.
So
now you can't, and unfortunately it's the precedent now. I mean, I heard the other day that there was, and it's kind of getting crazy. And you talked about CJ. The one thing CJ does, he markets his freaking kids, and he does a great job with marketing his players. I mean, he does an amazing job. I think what Huguenot has done, Huguenot has hired the guy that they should have hired. I mean, he's going to come in, and I hope he is there for at least 10 years. I hope he builds that to way Coach McPhee had, because when Huguenot, it's kind of like.
How old are you now?
How what?
How old are you?
I'm 54.
Okay, so that would make you 64. You're not going to do this till you're 64.
You never know, man. You never.
Okay, yeah,
you never know.
Yeah.
I might be
doing it long. Yeah.
So you never know.
I don't even know if I'll make it to tomorrow.
Yeah, but no. So as far as like if you and I were private school coaches, we'd be recruiting our tails off. You can't blame those guys, and you really can't, because it is legal for private schools to reach out and recruit. It is what it is. And I mean, if you were at Skyhawk Academy and I was at Lancer Academy, and we would be out there and trying to get every great player we could. I can't fault them for that. All right. You also, as a coach, you're not, like I said earlier, you're not going to change a parent's mind about who you are, what your program's about, and if this program is going to be best for my kid. It's just not even worth the fight. What I've told my coaches is that, who we're gonna go with what we've got. And this past year was a perfect example. I think we lost 5 starters that went on to other schools, and they're doing great, and we wish them well, and I hope they all get what they're looking for. But we had our staff did an amazing job kind of keeping this together, and it was hard. This past year was hard because we, again, losing those kids, and then losing to Holland Springs the way we did that first game. Our group could have easily folded, man. They could have easily packed it in and been like, oh man, we should have gone here, we should have gone there. We didn't have any of that. We didn't have any of that. And that's a tribute to my coaches, and that's a tribute to our captains on our team.
In the program. I mean,
in the program.
The culture, program. The tradition. The coaches that have been there together for so long,
It is. And we did a great job. I mean, we reeled off 11 wins and had a chance to play in a regional championship game. But I mean, shoot, Troy, you and I both have been affected by transfers. I mean, we've lost kids to Clover Hill. We've lost kids. We had 3 kids that were at Cosby this past year that were on our roster the year before. So it's just one of those things that the precedent has been set. And, I mean, I don't know. Unfortunately, I think it's only going to get worse through the years. I mean, because it's,
it's in college football. I mean, it's a 1-year deal. I mean, it's a 1-year deal. I mean, guys are leaving college football to go to pro football to coach because they got 3- and 4-year contracts on the players. So, I mean, it's almost like in high school ball, you got to coach the guys that are there now.
God, can you imagine being a college coach nowadays? Not only do you have to recruit high school, you have to recruit your roster, you have to recruit the portal, and then you got to hope that you don't piss someone off, because if you piss someone off, they're going to jump in the portal. I mean, you get a 4-star kid, that comes in that thinks he should start, that didn't start, that was maybe redshirted, then now they're going to leave. I mean, it's just like, I tell those guys all the time, I'm like, oh my God, I could not imagine. I mean, shoot, high school coaches, I mean, we've got to market our kids. We got to market our kids and put them out there on Twitter and everything else. So, their parents.
Yeah, but I mean, like you said, the college coaches, I mean, you said they recruit their roster, they recruit the portal, they recruit high school kids. High school kids have kind of gotten the raw deal in this whole thing. Because when I coached at Virginia Union, I mean, I almost had to tell high school coaches, like, we really don't recruit high school players, right? Because we were trying to win right now. Coach Holt said you recruit your contract. So, I mean, we were like the last chance you before the last chance you. Right. Like they should have made a documentary about us. It would have been way better than last chance you. Our guys would have beat up the last chance you, and our coaches would have beat up their coach, the guy that's whatever school that was, Independence, the guy from Compton that tried to get me fired. Contacted our principal over Totem Pole Sports. I mean, it's the high school kids have gotten the raw deal.
They have, and it's I mean, I think I'm still kind of old school. I still think getting your education paid for is awesome. I mean, I don't know much about the NIL money. I wish, I wish that would have been open back when we were playing. I would have been happy with like free Buffalo Wild Wings and free beer for the month. That would have been great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess that's just at a very, very elite level, the NIL money. Maybe it's not. I mean, I don't know a lot about it either. I mean, I guess cheating is legal now. I mean, the SEC is known for giving the biggest bags. And now I guess everybody can cheat. So, who knows, man? But, I mean,
it's a tragedy.
The best players don't always make the best team. And the best team, but the best team always wins. And, I mean, look at TCU. I don't know how many guys they got, but look at all the people that Texas A&M bought, and they didn't even have a winning season.
Right.
So,
and 18 of those guys have jumped ship now. The 18 of their 24 guys that got like $1 million in NIL money have left A&T. Ain't that crazy?
Yeah. I mean, I guess what you get what you pay for, and it's almost like with the expansion of playoffs, NCAA, and then TCU, going to the finals. I mean, will we see like a March Madness basketball where a team like Valparaiso or Gonzaga like a team who has players for 4 years can go and compete against these elite level teams that only have guys 1 year. Like, like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like a team that you wouldn't expect to play for a national championship in football that has players that's been there 4 years and
Right.
love each other and buy in will go and beat a team like an Alabama. But I don't know, man. I mean, so I guess we're almost on the present day, man.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we left off that you want to put on this? You talked a little bit about your daughters. You talked about, but you didn't talk a lot about your daughters. You want to talk a little bit about them?
Oh
Or
yeah,
do you have grandkids?
Oh my God, no! I'm not that old.
Okay, you don't. So is
So
there any?
my daughters both were Manchester grads. I mean, they both were managers for me. They both played softball. Uh, I have my oldest, and it's a perfect example. We always talk about do people need to go to college? We talk about that in class all the time. My oldest daughter is a perfect example of a kid who she would not have done well in college. She has a great job. She's working for a friend of mine in his company. She's doing very well for herself now. I'm very happy to say that. My youngest daughter went to college. She played college softball. She works for the Timmons Corporation now. She's an environmental scientist, and she's engaged to get married this next year. So that's my girls are doing great. Like I said, my wife and I going into year 25 in Chesterfield. So it's been a crazy ride. This will be our 32nd year, maybe being married, 33.
You better get that right.
I know, man. I better.
This is live stream, man. I mean, I can go back and edit stuff out, but
she's but yeah, it's been a fun ride, man. It's been a fun ride. So who knows what the future holds? I mean, you were talking about you're not going to do this until you're 64. I don't know. I feel good. I mean, you just never know. I think my thing is just God's got a plan. He always, I mean, I've just told my story. I mean, that's the one thing you never plan. You better not come up with the plan because he's going to have the plan for you.
Yeah, that's a saying. There's a saying to that, and the saying is, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
Yeah,
and I think that's Jay-Z. That's Jay-Z.
Yeah.
I listened to Jay-Z and Kevin Hart's podcast, and that was one of the things he said. And another thing he said was this. He said, things don't happen to you, they happen for you. Like you didn't get the Franklin job. You didn't get the Buffalo Gap, and you're like banging your head against the wall, wondering like, why is this not happening? Am I doing something wrong? Am I not working hard enough? Is it what do people not like me? But then when it's supposed to go your way, it goes.
Right.
Like my brother, I asked my brother once, I said, man, what was it like coaching that team, in 2018 with all those great players and a team that should win a state championship? And he said, just try not to mess it up.
Try not to mess it up. Yeah.
Not to mess it up. Like, I guess like you getting that Manchester job, it was like, it was supposed to happen. It was the Lord's plan. And like your job was just not to mess it up.
Right. I agree. I mean, I agree with all that. I mean, it's like I said, we're going to enjoy the ride as long as we're on it and then see what happens next.
So, for the future of this podcast, I've talked to Kevin Tucker. I want to do one on Coach Vic Williams. We probably need to do a bird one on Coach Schrotenboer. Hank Norton, all those great coaches. Because I want to I just don't want this to be a clinic. We're going to do X's and O's, but we're going to do more because, you were a veer guy and you wanted to go out and learn all these different offenses. But in the end, it's not the X's and O's, it's the people. And I think Woody Hayes, one of the greatest coaches of all time, he said you win with people.
Yep.
I mean, It's not the X's and O's. It doesn't matter what you do as long as you hang your hat on it and you believe in it,
And you get others to believe in it. That's the key. I mean, you can have any scheme that seems amazing, but if your kids don't buy into it, The easy sell for us going from, and we're still a spread team, but I mean, we run the power and we run ISO and we still run the power game.
Yeah.
But that's what you got to get your kids to buy into that. So yeah, it's not the X's and O's, it's the Jimmy and Joes. Your Jimmy and Joes better buy into what you're doing. And if you do a great job selling that, look, to be a good coach, you better be a great brainwasher. I always said that. You better brainwash kids to one, some years they better think they're a whole lot better than what they are. You've got to, sometimes you've got to trick them in being more prepared than what they are. You got to prepare them for whatever. The years that it's easy is when you have kids like in 18 and like your when you were at Meadowbrook, when you just had a group of guys that loved each other and that it wouldn't have mattered what you did. Just like you said, don't wreck the bus. Just let the bus run itself. So, it's been fun. It's fun, like around now, like watching Lauren's teams at Highland Springs. Man, I love playing them. I mean, I love playing against his teams. I mean, it's because you know what you're going to
Who
get.
got beat worse? Who got beat worse? Who got beat worse?
Yeah,
us or y'all? Who got beat worse? I think ours was like.
Oh, we got beat. Well, the 2 years prior to that, it was a great game. But this
Yeah,
past
I know.
year,
I know.
It was like
I'm just trying to think. It was 14, 21, 28. I think it was 35-0. What did y'all lose to?
Ours was like 42-7 or whatever, man.
Yeah,
But
about the same.
Yeah, it is what it is. But I enjoy playing him. There's a lot of I enjoy playing against you guys. It's fun. It's going to be an interesting year. Like I said, a lot of new faces in the region. So it should be interesting.
Yeah. So what do you think the future of this podcast needs to be?
Dude, I think it's limitless. I think you can talk to. There's so many guys out there that some old school guys that we had mentioned some on this, like Ted Salmon, Dave Cooper, Keith Daniels. Oh my God, that'd be a trip podcast right there, man. Talking to him about softball and stuff like that. I mean, there's so many opportunities, and like you're doing the X's and O's part, man. It's just, I think you're doing an amazing job. Amazing job. Like you always been. You're full steam ahead, Troy. Full steam ahead, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I feel, I feel like the Road Runner. Or was it Wiley? Which one ran off the cliff?
That's the Coyote, man.
It was the Coyote. Maybe I'm the Coyote. I don't know, man. So is there anybody else we're leaving out or anything else you'd like to say? We went through a lot.
I mean, there's so many people, man. I mean, like my staff now, I got Dennis Jones, who came from Thomas Dale. Y'all are boys, I know. And just so many, with Jamar Mosley's joining my staff. And I mean, it's just, so many people. Like Terry Dalton was one of my little league coaches, and he's pretty high up in the officials now. And, like I said, it's just so many guys along the way and teachers along the way. It's just been amazing. It's been an amazing ride. I'm sure I'm leaving people out. Maybe I can come back and do it again sometime.
Yeah. Well, you can come back on anytime.
I'm gonna come back on Matt Bland so we can share.
Yeah, that would be awesome. That might be impossible to get him to talk.
Yeah, no question.
But do you remember when I called you when we before we played in the regional championship this year? I hadn't talked to you in a while. Mm-hmm. But do you remember what I said or what we talked about?
I do.
What was that?
You told me how happy, or not how happy, but the job that we did this past year, and that really meant a lot to me because it's I mean, it's for another coach to recognize what a program has done. You overcome adversity. And what did I tell you? You remember what I told you?
Yeah, you said you were happy because you're a Bird guy. You know, you went to Bird, and you're happy that Bird was back in the regional championship, and then we're both playing in it.
Yeah,
So, I
I
mean,
told you that our area is better when bird football is good, and
mhm.
I think Chris said the same thing the other day. And
Yeah.
no, it's pretty cool, man. It's pretty humbling. Everything that we get to do on a daily basis, you know.
Yeah. So, like, I don't start beef with any areas of, the state, because I've had people try to get me to, talk junk about the 757 or Northern Virginia. And I won't do that because we're all from Virginia. But like 804 football, I mean, since they changed the alignments and, allowed us to play against teams that are the same size as us in the state playoffs,
Mhm.
the 804 has won numerous state championships, whether it be Highland Springs or Meadowbrook or Bird or Hopewell or Manchester, or I'm probably missing some other teams.
Dinwiddie,
Yeah,
Dinwiddie.
Dinwiddie, Coach Billy Mills that we've had on the clinic. Everybody needs to make sure they watch that. I
Mhm.
mean, is this? I mean, I know that there's never been a time period before this that the
Right.
804 has had this amount of success. And, we've played a part in this and we're documenting the history. But how did it happen? Like, how was it that the 804 was able to catch up to, some of those other regions and be able to compete? Was it?
I really think I think it has a lot to do with when the Virginia High School League allowed us to start doing things in the off season. And maybe maybe the other programs were already doing that, but we were never allowed to. I mean, this is before you even were a head coach. I mean, back in, like you said earlier, if you were going to do something, you would have to call it a camp.
Yeah.
Now they allow you to do things in the off season. You can practice with no equipment. You can do that, and I really think that's kind of narrowed the gap. I really feel like when they allowed us to do that, and it'd be interesting to kind of do some research when that took place to see when we started closing the gap. Look, 757 is always going to be special, and there's some Northern Virginia teams that are always going to be special. We're just kind of partial to this area because we've got so much invested in it. But I really do. I think that the coaching around here has gotten better. I think how we prepare our kids in the off season has gotten better. And it would be interesting that might be a pretty good podcast for you to find out when they changed that rule to when we started having 804 teams winning the state championship.
Yeah. I mean, if they ever do anything to try to eliminate that rule, I'll be at Virginia High School League's office talking to Dr. Hahn or whoever else I have to talk to, Sean Knight, because if they ever do try to limit, out of season stuff, you're only going
No,
to be hurting the football because basketball did it, baseball did it, and they're going to be limited. They're going to be limiting the opportunities that kids have in the
yeah,
off season to be evaluated, and having college coaches come to your spring practices or your 7-on-7s. I mean, nobody should have to run around and hide or use, a Coke bottle as a football.
correct.
I mean,
Have they talked about doing that again? Have they talked
I
about
mean, there's always places that want to get the rule changed, but I'm not going to let it happen.
right?
I don't. It doesn't matter to me. I'm going to do everything I can.
I got to plug my phone in. My
Yeah,
phone.
it's all right. It's all right.
I need the thing coming.
What we're gonna do a podcast on the coaches' pay in Chesterfield, and assistant supplements, because I mean, it just something needs to change, man. When you have this much turnover. Um,
Yeah,
6 principals in Bird's 45-year history. I mean, that's impressive. I
yeah.
mean, Manchester, I mean, what, 3 head coaches since the 70s, 1 since the 2000s. I mean, and that's how you're
And
successful.
football coaches? No, there's been more than that.
Well, I mean,
I was listening to your thing the other day. I'm sorry. I'm like plugging in my phone. Um, so there was so PK Perrin, who is just inducted into Manchester's Hall of Fame was the head coach from back in the day. Um, and then you had with Swonis, Lloyd Swonis. Oh shit, Lloyd Swonis was only the head football coach 2 years. Did you know that?
No, I did not know that. Everybody talks like Lloyd Swellness was like Manchester football.
Yeah, he coached football for 2 years, and then he became the AD. All right. Then there was it was like a series of coaches for a while. There was a guy after Swonis. There might have been two guys. Then it was Billy Jarvis. Billy Jarvis was the head coach. I don't think any more than 3 years. I know he was in 84, 85, and maybe 86, but then he left. And then there was a series of guys after him again. And then it was Roger Chasm. And then it was me. But it was yeah, it's crazy like the number of coaches changes. I mean, you think about how many since since I got the job at Manchester in '99, how many Meadowbrook coaches has there been?
I mean, heck, I can't even remember the last 5 coaches. I mean, just it was yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, who 99? Who was the coach? It was Coach Nicely, I believe. So it's Coach Nicely, and then it was Coach Bowles, and then it was me, and then it was a bunch of different guys.
Right, right. So yeah, I mean, hopefully the VHSL does not do anything to water down coaching. Hopefully they would do something to improve coaching. I would still like to see us be like the Southern states and give us, 10 or 15 days of spring football. You know, I mean, I know my nephew's been a long time coach in Tennessee. They have spring football and it'd be interesting to see uh, if they would consider that. I don't think it's going to be in my time here, but it might be in your time.
I mean, with the game changing and blocking and tackling is almost illegal. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, do you really need pads to practice football? I mean, they'll probably say that it's safer, but I mean, I've had more kids injured in 7-on-7 without a helmet than I
Right.
did with a helmet.
Right.
But
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what the
yeah,
answer is. I think people pretty much go out and practice now without helmets.
yeah,
So, I mean, I think everyone's going to those, what are those caps called that?
yeah, the Guardian, whatever they are,
Yeah.
the 7-on-7 helmets.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we'll see.
Well, Tom, it's been a pleasure, man. I mean, 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Yeah. I don't know if we really talked about much, but we talked, but
Yeah, we talked about your whole career, and we hopefully some people learn something. I mean, one of the best podcasts out there, man, is to listen to Mike Smith, Coach Mike Smith on the Kirk and Bird podcast. I mean, he's the GOAT, man.
yeah, no question.
That's a great podcast. Anybody out there that's watching it. So, Tom, anything else you want to say to the clinic or any young coaches out there? And
No,
then,
no, Troy, you keep on doing your job, man. This is awesome, and like I said, any young coaches, man, the biggest thing, you take a job, it's all about the assistants, finding people that are going to be that are not afraid of work and that are loyal to you and loyal to the program. But no, I want to thank all of my former players, every kid that's been through our program. Some that have had great experiences, some that might have not had as good of an experience, but thank every Manchester kid because every one of them are why we are who we are today, and every coach that I've been fortunate to work with, I do appreciate them, and every coach that I've been able to compete against, I've appreciated that too. It's been fun.
it's been fun.
Yeah.
Until next time, Tom, we're signing off.
All right, Troy. Thank you,
See
buddy.
y'all.